Moving on to the next panel, Young Indians option galore, a reality check. I think I'll leave it as a mystery to you guys to handle from here.
Introduction. So I'm not going to talk about my profile. I'm sure you've been here since morning and you read through, and whatever is there in my profile is no guarantee to what you're going to get next 1 hour. Okay? So I'm going to take you through three people who actually represent our experience and one person who's going to represent the lack of it. But that's a surprise, and I would like to welcome people who are going to be next 1 hour with us, Sujitesh, Madhav, Debolina, and Priyanka. I do for a living, one, it's easy. Every day I moderate between HR, finance, business. When somebody is fighting with the other, I actually moderate. So this is an easy job to do, and I believe that's a good thing to do. And two, in ISF, most of us moderate from the ISF side because then we can control time. So those are two things that we can do. And today we really need that part to happen as well, right? Getting to the panelists today, except me, everybody is an engineer there. It has no proof to what they're going to talk about, but very interestingly, they're going to talk about talent. They're going to talk about talent and the options in their own way. And the way I look at it is, if I had to look for an option today, how would it be different than 20 years ago? I'm here, so a little bit of myself, if not for the past. When I looked at my first job, I went to a biotechnology company. First day, no appointment order. The MD looked at me, who's a scientist himself, and said, you work here 3 days. If you like your work, I'll give you an appointment order. Okay, that was 20 years ago. I was not a bad student. In a class of 8, I came second. So so I was okay. But I went first day, I realized that this is not what it is. Like somebody came out of college yesterday and somebody saying, you work 3 days in LC. It was a fantastic lab. I don't know whether they still exist in Bangalore, but I walked out of it. It's not on my CV, so don't tell anybody. But day 2, I walked out of that place. And I was talking to Priyanka yesterday. And Priyanka represents somebody who's passed out of college this year. She's an engineering graduate, passed out of computer science. She's going to join a very, very reputable analytics company next week. So she's here in that period to talk about the most important piece. One thing that's going to happen today afternoon is no panel can beat us because we are the youngest panel. Thanks to Priyanka. Oh yeah. And the gender diversity, so thanks, Debolina. Actually, I wanted to say that because of Debolina, we look young, but nevertheless. I think one of the other aspects to this panel, and I know I'm introducing them in a way, but is about 2 of them have actually spent a lot of time researching, in this area, and one of them is going to talk about it as well. So clearly, when we talk about options today, I know Sarabjit nicely put it out about, wage day, you come to OLX, there's no longer Naukri, no longer Dice, Monster, it is OLX and somebody else too. OLX is here, I'm not going to talk about other options, but clearly we are talking about the options available online, and we also as a staffing federation represent agencies which also offer options. There are corporates which offer options. So there are options everywhere, and there's also 12 million people coming into this space. That's what we're talking about. Do all these things match? Who talks to who? That is what I think, we're going to focus on the next 1 hour. I don't know whether we have all the answers, but at least if we come with a few questions, I'm sure somebody will solve it for us soon. That's how we're looking at it. I want to start with Priyanka. Why? Because she's just come out of it. She said 850 people in the university that she passed out. She passed out from MVIT. All of them got placements. Fantastic, right? 850 engineering students got placements. Priyanka, if you got your mic on, tell us how many of them actually got the job that they wanted and how you chose your job as well.
I'd like to give an example. How many of y'all here are married? Show of hands, please. Most of y'all? So when you were looking for your prospective, you didn't know if that prospective could take your tantrums, could cook well for you, nothing at all. You just hoped it would be a happy serendipity, right? That was the plight. That was the exact situation that I was put in when I just graduated. The final year of engineering is when you realize that you need to get out of your comfortable nest and move out to the industry. Now, when I got placed, the options were plenty for a CS student. For people who are in the core, it was absolutely zero. For some branches, it was zero. So those people moved to the corporate sector, that is the IT industry. So if you'd ask me how many of us got the job that we actually want, I'd say 15% out of the 850, and the rest of them are in it because they have no choice.
And how did you choose your job?
I chose my job. One is peer pressure. 2 is package. I'm being honest. 2 is package, and 3 is the brand value of the company.
The peer pressure doesn't come first with the second part of money being there?
The peer pressure, I'll explain how the peer pressure works. Let's say my friend A got a job which pays 5 lakhs per annum. Alright? So it's in 3 years it's 5 lakhs, 5 lakhs and 5 lakhs, and that is 15 lakhs. Now I got a job which pays 3 lakhs in the first year, 6 lakhs in the next year, and 9 lakhs in the next year. So when you add 3, 6 and 9, it's 18, right? So my job is better.
Now they know which company you're joining. They're all recruiters out there.
In terms of peer pressure, when we talk, while that person says, I got a 5 lakh job, I retort with saying my job pays 18 lakhs for 3 years. So that's the basis of choice that we make.
Okay. Cool. One more thing which I asked Priyanka yesterday, it was a revelation to me, is I said, if you had an option which was in your dream company, which had an end date to it, would anybody out of these 850 people who possibly did not meet their aspirations, she was telling that mechanical engineers were picking jobs in an IT company, so would they have picked up an option, let's say, in a manufacturing company, if it had an end date? And she said, no. Can you explain why?
Right now, if you give me a job that suits my needs, where I can express my opinions and explore my talents, and tell me there's an end date, I would definitely not take it. And if you put it up against an option where it's a big company, it pays you well, you can grow up in the ladder, if you put that option against this, I would take the ladder. Because one is, right now we don't know what our options are. Let's say the end date is near. Where will I go ahead? Where will I go further? What will I do next? That what will I do next question is something that is unanswered even now. Maybe, let's say 5 years down the lane, if we are aware of how to move around, how to move to different companies, what are the skills that I need to acquire to go to a different company, and how do I get a job, not be given a job, but to get a job that utilizes my skills in the way I want it to be utilized. Maybe, if that knowledge is there, maybe I will take it, but right now, no.
So that's a kind of a takeaway from our staffing federation point of view. Many of us are staffing companies here, that today's freshers, one, she didn't know that there is an industry like this, there's a contract job available, so that's where we started our conversation when we spoke. And 2, people are not willing to take an option to be a contract employee, if I can use that word, And with that, I flipped that to Madhav. Madhav, actually recruits in a way, in fact, people like Priyanka, and from your perspective, Madhav, when you look at people that you hire, what are the key things that actually gets thrown at you in terms of your own hiring choices? Would you hire somebody, who actually is, straight away fitting into your piece, or somebody who has a potential 6 months from now? And based on a skill level or the lack of it, would you take them on a permanent role or temporary role? Can you just talk?
Okay. So hi all, I'm not famous like Kamal, so my name is Madhav. Good question. I think you are in an industry where there's no point waiting for a perfect resume. So it never happens. I think very soon a lot of recruiters and employers have started recognizing and subscribing to the fact that there's nothing called as a perfect resume. It doesn't happen. I have a mixed experience. So there is this huge talent available in India. Okay, there are a bunch of that pockets where as an employer, you would want to go and get that talent, and which also leaves you with another 88% of talent who are not touched by you. Right? So you end up in a situation hiring a mix of both, where you get you chase for a talent and you hire them. At the same time, there is talent available other than the current talent, the talent you want to search for. And you involve some assessments to get them at the same bar. So it's a mixed experience of hiring both from the campuses where we want to be and campuses where there is talent available but didn't have an opportunity to meet us.
Okay. Fair enough. I just want to flip it a little ahead in terms of the research work Debolina has done, which is into the choices that people are making, as to how are they making those choices, and what are the parameters going into it. I'd rather make Debolina talk about it. It's research that she's worked on. Few slides because post lunch we wanted to hold your attention, so maybe some eyebrow contest between Debolina and the slides.
Thanks, Kamal. Let me start with a little story. I think all of us, growing up, would have heard about. Yeah, is that work? Is that? Okay. Yeah, so all of us would have, heard this Panchatantra story about this woodcutter who was sitting and cutting a tree, and his axe fell into the river. So the river goddess, she came out, and she offered him a golden axe, and she said, "Is this your axe?" So he said, "No, this is not my axe." So then she took out a silver axe and she offered it to him, and he said, "Is this it?" And he said, "No, that's not my axe." So then, she took out the rusted iron axe and offered it to him, and he said, "Yes, this is my axe, thank you so much." And then goddess was so pleased, really, really happy with his honesty, and gave him all three. Now part 2 of that story is a few months later, he was still cutting wood on his tree, and his wife was washing clothes by the river bank, when this time, instead of the axe, the man himself fell in. And the wife was wailing and moaning, and the river goddess came out and she offered him George Clooney. And the wife said, "Yeah, that's it. That's my husband." So the goddess was absolutely infuriated. She says, "What is this? How can you do this?" So she said, "Listen, let's just cut to the chase. After George Clooney, you're going to offer me Brad Pitt. And then I'll say, no, that's also not my husband. And then he'll offer me my husband. And then I'll say, yes, that's my husband. And then he'll say, I'm so happy, you take all three. And I'll listen, I can't deal with you." Now the thing is, if I come on to the thing about wanting the moon, so when my experience, and I've been recruiting for nearly 2 decades, and although I'm the youngest member on this panel.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. My experience in talking to the young generation getting into the workforce was they actually wanted the moon. So I was a little bit like the wife said, let's cut to the chase. Somebody tell me what is it that these guys want. And that was actually the genesis of my research. So I started first. Is this working? Brad, next slide. I'm not sure. Yeah. So I started reading up in terms of a lot of sites giving me information saying this is important. People want work-life balance, people want pay, 95% want pay, 67% want work-life balance. And if you add up all those percentages, it's like some 200,000 percentage, And I was like, what is the individual contribution of pay? Which is more important? How do I know? And it's in a utopian environment where an organization can say, I'm going to take all the levers, I'm going to give them pay and work-life balance and an ethical environment and a great organization image and, the works. Now, reality check, all of us are not living in a utopian environment. We are working with limited resources, and the HR managers sitting in this organization, we need to optimize where we put our marketing buck, right? Our recruitment messaging that we want to send out, What do I pitch? Do I say I'm the best paymaster? Do I say I offer work-life balance? I wasn't clear. I wasn't getting that answer, and that is where I started this research. So, is this working? No, this is not working. Yeah. So some just broad, understanding of where I got this data from and how is this relevant. So if you could just click on this and I can run through this slide. This is 582 respondents of less than 30 years of age who have filled in this survey from the IT and manufacturing industry. These are guys of the white collar workforce, okay, so not representative of the blue collar, but white collar workforce, less than 30 years of age. 582 respondents, adjusted R-square basically means that this data, the factors which are coming out in this research, explain 71% of the variance of the intention to apply for a job. That means I am predicting with 71% accuracy the intention to apply for a job. And what is the predictive validity? That's point P value that we call about. Thank you so much. P value is the probability of error and the error of getting a false positive. So in this case, the probability of this gentleman actually being pregnant is less than 0.001%. So my point being that the factors coming in this research are actually predicting 71% of the intention to apply for a job with a predictive validity of 99.99%, right? And what is it? Okay. So this is a slide which is showing what is the performance and importance. It's a performance importance matrix. What it does, I'm not going to get into the details of the statistics, but essentially what comes out is anything which is on the top and anything which is on the extreme right is the most important factor. And I'm not sure, unlike Sarabjit, if you guys can see the slide. Can you see it at the back? Otherwise I'll have to probably read it out. Top right hand corner, that pink little button that you see, that's organization image. Now I don't know which one works and I'm scared to move this.
Top right.
Yeah. Yeah. So this factor is organization image. It's the employer brand, employee value proposition, the perceived value of the organization, right? Employer reputation. This explains 49.2%. This is the beta value. That means 1 unit increase of organization image will increase my intention to apply for a job by 0.49. That's practically half, right? So it's the highest predictor of an intention to apply for a job. No surprises there. We know organizations, good employer brand, really attract the best talent. Now an interesting thing which came out, and this is again young talent, okay? So what is young talent saying? Something known as perceived ethical citizenship. Now what does that mean? It's basically how do employees perceive that they're treated in terms of degrees of fairness? Are they treated with respect? Is there a grievance addressal mechanism in place? Is it a level playing field? Are there systems and processes to address foul play? All of that. Perceptions of fairness. Is the organization and HR practices perceived to be fair? Is one of the very, very significant factors influencing intention to apply for a job. And this is explaining 0.36. The beta value here is 0.36, right? There isn't, I might be attracted towards a job and that might explain just as much as low as 0.12. But it's a very important factor. So, pre-messaging right up front is important. Pay. Well, I did hear pay, and this is an assumption that all of us who are in HR and recruitment assume pay is the single biggest driver. Actually not true. It is important. This is explaining 0.23%, or rather 23%, I'm so sorry, 23%. And then the one factor which has emerged is also called as culture fit, the PO fit, right? So these are factors, these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 factors are explaining 71% of the intention to apply for a job. That's not to say that, let's say, work-life balance or type of work, very, very challenging work is not important for, let's say, somebody, a bright young kid. But this is representative of a population. And how is this important for the audience sitting here today? People who are, I mean, as HR practitioners, whether you are running staffing firms or whether you are the employers, the employing organizations offering permanent jobs, these are the drivers for the young talent today. If you can offer these values to the talent, you have a fairly high probability of attracting the talent to your doors. Okay.
Thank you, Debolina. So from research we move to experience again, and I asked Sujitesh in terms of the IT workforce. IT workforce is considered a workforce which doesn't possibly have the greatest of the loyalties. If I had to make that accusation before we respond to that. Also, most of us, when we look at the options, anybody who's in this room, who's in a staffing company, who's in a recruitment company, actually wants to have IT practice. Because we believe that's, of course, it's a large market, and two, that gives so much options to all of us. So there's business sense. The most outsourced recruitment part comes from IT companies. So does the options for the IT professionals, right? So from an option point of view, there are plenty. But at the same time, you are the industry who adopted, so-called contract stuff, possibly as the early adopters, and it is still the single largest part of contractual workforce that we see. Of course, engineering has a different context to it, but let's stick to staffing in India, where IT industry was the first to adopt to it. So in terms of what you experience from an option perspective, there are plenty. At the same time, there are entry-level people who actually, possibly 1 to 3 years are the ones who actually are off for a contractual kind of a job. At the same time, that paradigm is shifting in terms of you wanting to have more experienced people who possibly you would take on a fixed-term contract. How do you actually are observing this being played out, especially experienced people, taking them on contract? What is the productivity you're able to get from them? And the options they have. At the same time, lateral market is still there. People are still being hired for a permanent job. So how is this contest getting played out from an option point of view?
Okay, great. So I don't have slides like Debolina. I have to keep people awake. So I'll also be conscious that this is a post-lunch session. So just a little bit of a comic thing. So I was looking at the topic for the day, and everybody talked about young and India and employment. But I think mystique is something which was not spoken about. Right? And if you go to Wikipedia and mystique, and those of you who follow comic books, the mystique is like a super villain. Right? So after all the heroes and zeros that you've heard, so I'm a little kind of playing the mystique part. And to be honest, employment mystique is a phenomena that is something that's going to be a reality for us. Right? So that's the first opening thing I'd say. Now, it was a very interesting conversation because we heard from Priyanka of what a fresher expects, as somebody who was completely, and then this supported by research, and Madhav on the campus hiring standpoint. I'd actually like to play this in the reverse and turn it heads on and saying, once people gain experience and specialist experience, they actually start looking for things that they never started off with. Okay. So one is when you start off looking, people look actually for an opportunity. Right? So when they don't have an opportunity, and that's where basic staffing or basic employment is related to. But as they gain specialization or gain experience, they actually are looking for alternatives and choices. So it's no longer about opportunities, but looking at alternatives and choices. And that's where that whole career shifts or job shifts is coming on, and people not being loyal. Right? As Priyanka mentioned, and I think I've gone through this, hearing from a lot of people who are freshers or starting out this, and saying I'm looking for a permanent job. Right? But at the same time, I don't want to be loyal. Right? And when we go and look at today's segment, which is typically a 5 years, 8 years, or maybe at best 12 years kind of a profile or person, the person is no longer looking for permanency. The person is actually looking for flexibility. Right? Then comes the point on pay. Right? So when you start off, you look for basic income. And as you grow up, you're saying, can I have additional income? And I think that the strategy of 3, 6, 9 is working against 5, 5, 5, or 5, 5.5, and 6. Right? So we are at a very interesting juncture where I think there is an opportunity. Now, what I may be saying is an opportunity that lies in the 20% of the workforce, not the 80%. And why I'm saying that is most of our discussions today and what I saw, some of it, thanks Kamal for sharing some of your research reports, is concentrated on the less than 30 segment, like less than 30 years of age. Now, what we are forgetting is being young does not necessarily mean being young in terms of age. Right? So when people get into that 30 to 40 range, they still are young because they're young at some skills. They want to be, learning, relearning, and all that. And I think if we go deeper into it, we may find some interesting ways of restructuring employment. Okay? I can share some ideas. Like today we're talking about second careers. We're talking about alternate careers. We're talking about people who wanting to come back into the workforce. Now, some of the times we see that HR policies and guidelines become a roadblock because you're always trying to fit them into your normal scheme of things, the so-called people employed, right? So I see a lot of potential, a lot of things changing. Right? That's from the talent perspective. From a customer perspective, and being in my role, I get into a pre-deals stage. We're seeing a lot of times where customers say, I want to try out something. Right? So here is a handshake, and going back to Priyanka's example, she used the word saying, how many of you are married? Right? Actually say, goes back and I'll not name the company, but there used to be something called as a dating alliance. Right? And today, honestly, if we re-question ourselves and say how much of the workforce actually wants to date out, and there is also a beautiful concept in terms of work-life balance, right? So a lot of people today in that 30 to 40 segment, which is maybe 20% of staffing is happening in that segment, actually would ask and say, can I do a part-time job? And I'm becoming more flexible, right? So that's, I think, an attempt to answer your question.
Okay. Go on, Madhav.
So I just have a point. I think Priyanka has to correct me here. So is it was the point about loyalty or was the point about freedom when you said you want to look out for a job? Because Sujit was talking about loyalty, quoting from where you started. So in my opinion, Kamal, it is the generation now are looking at more of freedom, and the definition there is for them to willingly look for options outside beyond bond. I think that's my point. So what did you mean by that? Loyalty or freedom?
In terms of loyalty, if you would ask me, will I stay with a company because my boss is good to me? No. Will I stay in a company because the work is interesting, I think I can grow better, I think I can gain much knowledge, experience in the field, and it is actually interesting, it makes me want to come back to work every morning. If that is what is offered to me in a company, then yes, loyalty would work. In terms of freedom, if it is even in the same company, I see freedom in terms of experimenting more. Whether it is role change or different projects. So if you give me a variance in the kind of work I do, I think people would like to stick to a company. This is the mindset that I think will represent my generation. So if the kind of work that is being provided or offered to us is interesting and is actually kindling our mind enough and making us want to come back every day to the work, that's the kind of job you'd want to do every day. So in terms of freedom again, can I pursue my passion outside? Am I stuck to my desk job 9 to 6 every day? Can I go out and pursue what I want? Whether it is taking guitar lessons or pursuing my singing, can I actually do that? Because this is the time I want to do it. If my work allows me to do that, yes. Because I have seen my seniors who've been fantastic cricketers, and their job actually allows them to go outside and participate in tournaments. So if you kind of allow them in that way, freedom works, yes.
And if I have to get a little nasty and ask you that, in between, do you also think that the company I work for also needs to do well?
I'll give you an example. My dad comes up to me and he says, you need to study well, you need to study well, you need to score this, you need to get into a B school. I take out his report card and it says fail, 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 fail. You think I'll listen to him? Absolutely not. So I think the company I work for needs to walk the talk. Otherwise, it's kind of negligent, you know, when you're trying to drive your employees to perform better. Is the company performing better? The company is not performing better. As the top level representatives, you cannot preach that to
We're
us.
going to telecast this live tonight, and your future employer is going to say this.
I would absolutely like to be the person who walks the talk and show what needs to be done, then tell them what needs to be done.
True. And also, I think one of the things that we've been debating, is Debolina, your experience that you have seen, that there is this workforce who are not likely to be loyal. They're demanding all the time that you walk the talk, and somebody gives you more money, I'll still go. Even if you say you work in this company 20 years, you'll be CEO, nobody's interested today, right? People come with the here and now, right? If you don't walk the talk tomorrow, I'll go is what she's saying, essentially. So how do managers actually manage this diversity, the diversity of different kinds? You have a workforce which has a lot of options. One, outside. Two, they're not loyal because of the options. Three, the diversity is in the form of, there are people who are contractual employees, there are people who are so-called permanent employees. So have you seen that the organizations you work for or a friend circle, how are the managers equipped to manage this diversity today?
So building on what Priyanka said, right, it's essentially about seeing your managers work the talk, and if you can gain that respect, whether you're a temp or whether you're a permanent, your workforce will stay with you. I've seen certain instances. It's like as parents, our children will do what they see us doing, not what we tell them to do. So it's those behaviors. So as managers, if we demonstrate, an aptitude or a learning agility, I see challenges with certain managers who are probably not savvy on basic Excel skills, and keep sort of telling their teams, no, you're not learning this enough, you're not learning. They struggle on Microsoft Office and basic Excel, and to do a PowerPoint presentation, they'll need a secretary or somebody else. They're not tech savvy enough. No, they're not learning. They're not keeping themselves abreast. And so they're out of sync with the generation. Then they can't expect the respect of that younger generation. So it works both ways. If they demonstrate those values which the young talent is looking for, they demonstrate, they demonstrate fairness, whether it's a permanent or a temp employee, whether they show those learning agility. If they demonstrate loyalty and all of that, those are behaviors that the team will see and emulate. That is my experience.
I'd like to add on to that. If you take a look, 10 years ago, companies had bosses and people would listen to them. But now it's very much leadership driven. What I hear, what I see is when your boss is not boss. You can go out for dinner with them, you can address them by their names, but earlier it was not like that. The culture has changed. It's more like being friendly and getting the work done in that way. So if being a leader, if you cannot inspire us to work, I will just do what is required and not go that extra mile. So if I have to go that extra mile to contribute to the organization that I work for, I think my leader needs to be good and should be someone I look up to.
Lady, make the most of the mic. You're not going to get a mic from next week. I think very interesting. I think Priyanka, I want to sort of summarize what we discussed today with a few questions to you, because you are what we're talking about today, and I take the liberty with other panelists of putting those questions to you. Before I called you yesterday, had you ever heard about Kelly, Adecco, Manpower, Team Leads? I can go on for 15 names. Sorry guys if I can take any other names, my fellow colleagues and competitors. So I think there's a message there in terms of the options. They possibly today, I think from an ISF point of view, the only options that people are aware are the corporates which come to campus. And Priyanka was telling me that till they completed 7th semester, they didn't know some of the questions that they were asking in the interviews. They actually had to go back and actually sort of practice them. And so when you look at the opportunity side, you guys were pretty familiar with the Naukris.com. Have you heard Naukri.com before?
For a fresher, it's just two choices. Let me cut down the chase. You either get placed in campus, no, actually three choices. You either get placed in campus, or you go and find a job on Naukri or sites like that, or by recommendation. That is, your relatives know somebody, so you can go intern, and then if you're good enough, they will take you to the job. So these are the only three options that we are aware of right now.
Fair enough. Okay, I think in terms of the options, we clearly know that from a fresher point of view, people who either go to the campus, or you're only talking about Naukri, we talk of another 10 more today, and hopefully there'll be 20 more in 1 year from now from an options point of view. Clearly, I think when I look at the Staffing Federation and how we are trying to build awareness, we have a lot of work to do in terms of reaching out to the academic institutions. They definitely don't know us. So I think that's something which, as much as we say 5 million people have got placed through us in the last decade or so, there's work to be done. And the other part that we heard from Priyanka also is that people still don't prefer an end date to the contractual job, an end date to an appointment order, Whereas most of us in this room know with experience that there's nothing called as a permanent job. At least we would like to believe so. That there's nothing. I think all of us can turn up to office tomorrow and maybe, we don't have the job from that day. So I think the permanent job we believe is a myth, so, but you're free to your opinion as you want to say.
I am aware that a job cannot be permanent. For example, I want to work where I'm going to work for 2 years only. I'm very clear in my mind about that, because after that I want to move out and finish my MBA, for example. Most of us know that the job, we are only looking at how fast can we learn what the industry requires us to do. If you take a look at engineering, I'm an engineer, so I'll give you, can I give you a brief background about the curriculum?
Yeah, about 1 minute.
Yes, so we have 8 units, in which I do only 5 because I need to clear the exam. That 5 is just, that 5 units are just 10% of the entire subject, of the actual subject that is required for me to work on. Now with this knowledge, if I'm going to go out and tell an employer, I am skilled, can you please employ me? I don't think that's going to work. So what I will look at is first get a first job, then learn what the industry actually requires. Because there is a lot of gap between what we're taught and what the industry needs. So first I will try to bridge that gap. And once I know the trick of the trade, then I will move on to a better company.
Okay. So I guess that sort of summarizes the options galore part that we're talking about, that here you have a representation like us, in a way, nobody's loyal, there's no permanent job as we call it. And there is a differentiator called money, which we all know, but at the same time, walk the talk, otherwise the options galore. That's what we are hearing. I know we spent a lot of time with Priyanka, but we thought that as a panel, this is a unique part of the panel, so we gave more time to the youngest member in the panel. And we look forward to any questions. We have time for questions, so I'll get more time for questions. I don't want to hear the bell again, so. Questions, comments? We may not have the answers, that's why I say comments.
Good afternoon to you all. My name is Pritesh. I'm from an industry which is actually not synonymous to. Hello? Which is not pretty synonymous to most of you. Yeah. My question is again the youngest person in the panel, Priyanka. I am hearing more a conversation with respect.
You have to change his mind.
Yeah, I am actually, the discussion is more revolving upon a very idealistic organization perspective. Today's youth, as Debolina ma'am was also showing on her chart of hygiene factors, of non-hygiene factors, in fact, being more important than hygiene factors for any organization. How open is today's youth to join a startup or an SME where the organization structure is pretty flatter, where maybe the culture has not evolved over a period of time, because remember, every company was a startup at some point of time, and also where maybe you would run the risk of having a small package but growing in multifold. How open is today's youth to such organizations?
That again has a lot of factors involved in it, and the kind of people that are there in a batch, let's say 1,000 people, I would definitely say about a 30% or a 40% are open to it. If they know that, again, the question is how soon can I learn what is needed in the industry? If whatever organization it is, if it can teach me what my profession is going to be like, whether it is a startup or a well-established company, in the first 1 year or 2 year, I think we are more open to learning what it is actually. But if in case 5 years or 10 years down the lane, we already taught what is required, then I don't know the answer to that question. But right now, I think there is a good percentage that would like to learn before moving into bigger companies.
Okay, so you mean to say today's mindset also gives them the attitude to be a bigger fish in a smaller pond. That's what you're saying?
In a group of 5, I can guarantee that 3 people would be open to the idea.
3? Oh,
yes.
So you are the other 2.
Doesn't matter.
Okay, thanks so much. Thanks.
Actually, she's part of the 3.
This part of it.
Just that we promised that we're not going to name the organizations.
Yeah, I think there's no starting up with the curriculum. Yeah, so there is no starting up in the curriculum. The other one was that it's 5 units out of 8. So the 3 units were meant for the startups guys. So.
But also, there is this myth of startup. I think the question rather is the real startup versus the big boy startups who get a lot of funds. So there is a difference between startups. The real startup where there's no money in the bank versus the startup where what he's talking about. What is your definition of a startup?
As far as I have seen,
He's not a startup.
as far as what I have seen, right now, in my age, let's say up to the age of 25, everybody, my friends, my other network, everybody who started a startup has a company. They're doing something that is not essentially what degree they've completed in. So if they've studied something, they wanted to pursue their passion, so they started another company. Right now, that is the trend because I know a lot of people who've been doing something apart from what their degree states.
It's not the trend. You have history. See, three of them next to you, all engineers who are in talent.
In terms of starting, I mean to say in terms of starting. And And in terms of going to a startup company, these are the kind of people who are willing to, who envision something very big. They want to be the next Steve Jobs, and those are the kind of people who prefer a startup. And there are people who are willing to be, like, I want to glide around in a Rolls Royce by the end of 50 years. So I do not want to go through the hassle of starting up and go through the struggle and be there down in the dumps and then have an interesting success story. I would rather join a successful company and grow. So there are different kinds of people, and I think that will never change.
Sure. Thank you, Priyanka. Somebody else from the audience? Yeah.
Interesting perspectives on what all a prospective candidate wants in a job. But as Kamal said, if everyone's going to focus only on the wants of the next millennials, how are we going to do business? Because I agree with the point that you need a good working culture, you need a good organization with a stable strategy, a long-term perspective, and the works. But I think that research was really good because it kind of called out the top areas. But from what I hear the current generation and the upcoming generation talk, they seem to want a lot of things in an organization that ideally probably lives in utopia. You have those organizations only in utopia because at the end of the day, I work in 4 organizations. There are different shades and aspects of the organization that really push you as a professional and give you the fillip in your career, there are aspects that you won't. So it's like someone saying life's unfair. It is unfair, it is a reality, let's face it, but let's look at those elements and components that are non-negotiables. I think what you put across as a student or a potential career pursuer in the future, I think, don't you think there's a certain level of practicality or rationalization you need to do in what you expect from a job?
I was talking to Mr. Kamal earlier and I told him that 10 years ago my brother used to work for Google. And back then they had free this, free that, free this, free that, free snack station, free drinks and all of that. And back then that was my ideal job. Back then. But now, if a company is going to offer me all that, I know it's just a distraction to actual work. My generation is very much aware that we know we need to work and all the other facilities are just to make you feel better as an employee. Our generation is also ready to accommodate into what the company actually is giving us. So in terms, I think I look for growth in a company. Can I quickly learn what I want to learn? And if I have to compromise on long work hours, working during the weekends, not having free cabs, or something like that, I am open to it. If that means I will get good exposure in terms of learning and what the industry requires. If I can bridge that gap zone, again, I'm insisting on bridging the gap zone, I think our wants will decrease and we will get accustomed to what is being provided. If I know the same is being done on the other side. I hope that answers your question.
One last question or comment? Wow.
Okay, I like it.
Yeah. From the academy.
Just from the background, which everybody's already know, I would like to say that temp staffing is a nightmare for any college to come over and do. Because our admissions will go drastically low if we tell that temp staffing companies are coming and doing recruitment. We really, I know you will shoot me, I know everybody's ready with a gun there, but that is the reality. Our admissions will go down and if parents come to know that it's a temp staffing companies coming recruiting big time. Of course, we welcome you coming and giving us exposures about how you do recruitment and the different kinds of recruitment. We would love to have you in our campus.
Which colleges are you from?
Yeah, Community Institute.
You'll remember that.
Yeah, we would love to have you at campus, but really.
We are a $6 billion industry. We'll be 15 billion in the next 7 years. Your college will be bought.
Well, we'll see when the time comes, but really, on a lighter note, that is there. But really, I'm telling you, Randstand had a presence in our campus. Okay, there were students who came approached us and asked me, like Priyanka here came and asked me, what is the end gonna be like? What am I gonna do at the end of the period? So I would request many companies to come and give us exposure because we do not have that much of temp staffing companies coming and to the campus and giving us giving the students the exposure of what kind of opportunities they can offer.
I think I'll take that. I think that time will also change. There will be a time when there probably will not be a student at your college. The whole shift is happening. I think I see it from a very different mirror. Staffing companies would strongly collaborate with employers and they would become the brand ambassador of the employers at the campus. And that's going to happen. And I already see that happening in a large part of the world. And it's going to happen in India too.
Actually, CareerNet is one of the good examples which we have in India. Actually, in CareerNet, we have that where they come and represent many big corporates in the campuses, CareerNet Consulting. They themselves come for campus recruitment, they also represent big corporates and do the recruitment and they do the branding for the corporate.
Right. I think the larger worry at the college and the academia should be, are we giving adequate employable skills to the student? I would solve that problem first had I been at the college first.
Sir, just think about it. The parents worry, that their kids actually will will become temps in some company if temp staffing companies come to your company. These are the same parents in their corporates who will have temps as well, you know. So that's going to be the dichotomy. I say that also I have 2 girls, and maybe I don't know what I would feel like 6 years from now if my daughter comes and says, I got a contractual job, you know. So I still don't know the answer, but I've made my living out of that for 15 years, you know. So I'm a little more passionate about it, and I'm sure that, you know, I want to make sure next year some of your students get a temp job.
Please come.
No, and yeah, just to add, see, I think if you look at international geographies and research data, in last 20 years, if I just take specifically US, the number has moved on staffing, right? So in specialized staffing, it's not general staffing. Right? That number has moved to 35% to 55%, right? And here we are all saying, we are the youngest and all, and we want to catch up, right? So it's all going to fuse. Currently, when we talk about millennials, we have to accept that this is a transition phase, right? There's a lot of millennials still think what the parents have been telling and their expectations, marriage and all that. 5 years down the line, it's going to all change, right? So I think people are going to be accepting choices which give flexibility, and if it's at the cost of not having or having a contract letter with expiry date, which has got 150% the offers at an employment letter hand, the money is going to play that thing, and the permanency thing will go out. And we've experimented that in some instances, right?
I'm sorry, I couldn't help but get up and respond to what you just said, because I can't let that pass in my capacity. Okay, the thing is, 10 years back when we started, some of us started our staffing companies, and when staffing really came into fore, 70 to 80% of the kids we would at that point hire used to be freshers. Now, by the way, that figure has come down to 30-40%. And it is something that your industry that you represent need to introspect on, why that has happened. The other statistics which I would want to share with you is the National Occupation Code data. 90% of the kids in 90% of the jobs that are available in India require skill and zero knowledge. But 90% of the kids who are coming out of a college have knowledge and zero skills. That is precisely the reason that Priyanka mentioned that she wants to use 2 years of her time to pick up the skill. Temp job actually is your quasi-apprenticeship program for your kids. And it's important for everyone in this room to realize that that's how we are transforming. Making these kids who are right now unemployable in spite of their fancy degrees, employable through the stint in various blue chip organizations and multinationals, some of them are sitting on the dais, and giving them a stepping stone to the future. It's absolutely imperative for you to believe in that, for you to convince the parents, because as many of us might have witnessed in our organization, there are a lot of permanent kids who are in permanent jobs are leaving their permanent jobs and taking up temp jobs with us. It is a fact. Because these permanent jobs are with organizations who are largely no-named. There is really no glory in learning in being a permanent worker and being in such organization. It's far better to work as a temp with one of the best companies in this world, not just in India. And the other aspect of it is that at the end of the day, like Kamal mentioned, permanent job is a myth. So none of us in this room, by the way, are actually permanent employees. We are all temps. Our politicians are temps. And at the end of the day, the law of the land is exactly the same whether it's a permanent employee or a temporary employee. Your entitlements, your statutory benefits are exactly the same. I mean, we would, rather than, now that you mentioned about your organization, I'll make it a point that we come and visit you. Because I think we would want to make that cultural change happen even in the way everyone in the education fraternity is thinking. More so collaborate for you to think about skills rather than imparting knowledge. Because if you do that, trust me, this concern around who's a permanent employer and a temp employer will also go away. Our job is any day better than no job or just about any job, right? And we are providing a job. That's our role. I'm sorry, I couldn't just help. I had to respond to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ritu. I know where it was coming from. Okay, but I think it's also a lesson for all of us who are in this room, and especially the staffing fraternity, my colleagues, so-called competitors, that, you know, this is an area that we have not touched at all, you know, and there's so much there that we have to do. So thank you all for being a good sport, and you know, thank you all for sharing your thoughts. And with that, I think we are looking for a mementos now. Thank you.
A wonderful panel discussion and great questions. So we had a good debate from both sides, and I hope you enjoyed the session. May I request Bharati to please felicitate the team over here, the panels that we finally said we have.